Okay, hello everyone. This is Ricky Fury again, bringing you another video talking about survivability and Star Trek Online. My first video covered the basics of damage resistance and how it works in the game, along with how to get easy mission reward survivability consoles and devices in the game. Feel free to watch that video if you haven't already, and its link is in the description. Today I will be talking about something called threat generation, something really critical to everyone in the game, whether or not you are a tank. Now to start off with, threat generation is, to put it simply, the likelihood that an enemy is going to attack you because of the different things they are doing in your ship. Now there are a few basic ways to increase or decrease your overall threat generation in the game. The most basic version is a toggleable ability called Threatening Stance. Now, this particular ability gives a base 200% or 300% threat generation increase for having it toggled, and potentially a 100% threat decrease if you don't have it toggled, if you choose a specific thing called Threat Control in the Space Tactical skill tree, which is down over here. This very first button, whenever you level up several of the tactical skills, you get this option. Choose between threat control and hangar weaponry. Unless you're particularly a dedicated hangar pet captain, now whether or not you choose whether you're going to be a tank, I would really recommend getting threat control, just simply because, you know, if you're a tank, it'll allow you to tank better. And if you're not a tank, it will allow whoever is going to be tanking in your group to be able to tank better. So yeah, there's that. Another easy way to increase or decrease threat generation is through these command abilities down here at the bottom. Now certain ships that are cruisers or dreadnoughts will have these particular abilities down here at the bottom. And these abilities are Command Weapon System Efficiency, Command Shield Frequency Modulation, Command Strategic Maneuvering, and Command Attract Fire. And typically Dreadnoughts only have a Command Attract Fire and one of these other ones, typically Weapon System Efficiency or Shield Frequency Modulation. Now, as a Romulan captain, I've been kind of frustrated about this over the past couple of years, simply because the Romulan equivalent ships for the Federation and Klingon type ships that are cruisers and dreadnoughts do not have this ability, which has made it really hard for Romulans to effectively tank in equivalent type vessels. Now, with the new expansion coming and with the announcement that Romulans will be able to fly their allied ships, this will be less of an issue, as Romulans will have access to those ships that have access to this Command Attract Fire and be able to tank a little bit easier. It's for that reason why on my Rami Fed character, I use the Shenzhou from the Discovery show, and for my KDF Rami, I use the Elachi Shenshar Dreadnought, because they both have Command Attract Fire. And they are both decently good ships in terms of tanking. Just they both tank in a little bit different ways. But yeah, in terms of attract fire and how this thing works. So whenever you activate it, you give yourself a plus 100% threat generation, and you decrease the threat generation around yourself by 50% while it's active. It does also give some scaling out damage resistance, but as a tank, if you build it correctly, that's not really going to matter too much. So in terms of how the math works, so like for instance, like so if I'm here in my tank and you're right next to me within 5 kilometers, that's how this ability works. If you're within 5 kilometers of me in your tiny little escort and you don't have this active, then what's happening is, because of this ability, your overall base threat generation goes from 100% to 50%, and then because you're hopefully in the skill tree of threat control, because you don't have threat generation or threat instance active, that's cut in half again, down to 25% threat generation of what the base threat generation would typically be for your ship. Conversely, with me, because I have this ability, I have 300% threat generation based upon versus normally, plus this thing which gives an additional 100% threat generation. So comparing the two, my ship is doing 400% the threat generation of what my ship would normally do, while your little tactical escort will only do 25% of the regular threat generation. To put this in basic numbers, my ship is doing 16 times the threat generation of your ship. So your ship would have to do 16 times the damage of mine in order for the enemy to target you instead of me. Now, to put this in perspective, my ship is a pretty good ship. Actually, I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, that's just the basic things. Another aspect of threat generation is deals with the distance between you and the person that you're attacking. Now, let's do a different situation, and you have one enemy, and there's two ships, and neither of you are tanks, and you're both doing the exact same DPS, damage per second, to that ship. But one of you happens to be 1 kilometer closer than the other. And in that particular circumstance, the enemy NPC ship is going to target the closer ship versus the farther away one. As that ship is closer and by the rules of the game, technically more threatening to its survival. Now, along with this distance, there are a couple of abilities that can help to fool the enemy ships that I personally call zero distance abilities, or abilities that make the enemy literally think that you are literally right on top of them, like 0 kilometers away from them. There are some science abilities like Gravity Well, Tychon's Rift, and Tractor Beams that proc this really well, as well as engineering abilities like Aceton Beam, like what I typically have on my ship, as well as Eject Ward Plasma, which also works, but it's a little bit harder to position. It's basically like if you're going to be in like a mine build anyway, then you might as well use Eject Ward Plasma. Now, because of these zero distance abilities, it's really critical that if you happen to be a science captain and you don't want the aggro, you need threat control. You really need threat control, because otherwise it becomes extremely easy, especially if there isn't a tank in your party, for you to become the tank, for everyone to target you, and if you're not built correctly, for you to get completely blown up. Because by default, with science ships, sure, you've got a little bit higher shield, a little bit higher shields than most ships, but your hull is significantly lower. So you're not always the best type of tank. Now, the final aspect of threat generation, outside of, toggling threatening stance through having to track fire, and through the distance to your target and using different abilities to make the target think you're closer or farther away, is just the raw damage output that your ship is doing. And it's for this reason why a lot of times, like if there isn't a tank in your party, a lot of times it's like your little tiny little escorts in a group are the ones that are getting focused by the enemy. Because at the end of the day, I mean, like if a ship is doing more damage to someone else, then in theory the enemy would probably want to target the thing that's like hurting it the most, doing the most threat generation, hence the name of this category. Now, because of that, like scaling that I kind of mentioned earlier, that my ship can have 16 times the threat generation of a tiny little escort right next to me. Like that tiny little escort would have to do 16 times the damage of what my ship is doing. Now, as for just a little ballpark thing, just to let y'all know, one time when I was doing a mission, I accidentally got invited into the DPS Bronze League because I did about 35,000 damage per second during a run on this build in particular. And this build isn't designed for DPS. It's designed for it's designed for threat generation and for survival. In fact, that it's still doing decent damage. Like, it's not doing incredible damage, but still doing decent damage. And the fact that you and your little escort would probably have to do 16 times like 30 damage per second in order for you to have aggro over me, it's kind of unlikely that most of you in the fleet would probably be able to do that. Just saying. And because my threat duration is so high, I'm able to focus on like having other types of consoles, like different types of survivability consoles, and having other things just to add my threat generation even further. Yeah, there's another survival console here. So yeah, that's some of the super basic things about threat generation. I was going to add another category to this, but when I was timing things out, it was going super long, and so I'm going to save that for a separate video. But for TLDR about threat generation, there are a couple of easy ways to proc it. Whether or not you have threat stance up, whether or not you have attract fire up, and whether or not you have threat control selected in your skill tree under the stats here. Those are the three basic ones that you yourself by yourself can control to have more increased or decreased threat generation depending upon whether or not you want the threat from enemies. So yeah, that's just a couple bits from me for now. Thanks for listening in today, and have a good rest of your day.